I mean, right now, millions of people are literally starving their own muscle tissue just to drop pounds on GLP-1 medications.
Yeah, it's a huge issue.
Right. And at the same time, you've got people sweating over these arbitrary 10,000-step goals
Yeah.
that were, and this is wild, literally invented by a marketing
Well,
company.
absolutely. A total fabrication.
And they're ruining their mornings,
Yeah.
right? Waking up exhausted for these so-called optimized workouts that honestly don't even actually move the needle on their health.
Yeah.
It is just a wild time to be alive and an even wilder time to be trying to stay healthy.
It really is. I mean, it's kind of the ultimate paradox of modern wellness. We have more access to biological data than any human population in history,
Yeah.
but we are just constantly distracted by these microscopic biohacks, right? All while the macroscopic fundamentals completely collapse around us.
Exactly. Well, welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to cut through that exact kind of optimization noise for you. We've got this massive stack of sources in front of us. We're talking the most rigorous 2025 and 2026 systematic reviews, meta-analyses, clinical surveys, all of it.
The real heavy hitters.
Right. And we are looking at everything from gym floor lifting techniques and, the unintended consequences of weight loss drugs to daily step thresholds and even workout timing. The goal here is simple, really. We want to extract what actually matters for your long-term health and prove that the absolute basics, they don't just compete with the hype, they totally obliterate it.
Yeah, and the through line connecting all this new data is, well, it's a profound pivot in the scientific literature.
Gotcha.
We're seeing clinical researchers actively turn away from these hyper-restrictive complex regimens. They're pointing us instead toward the underlying physiological mechanisms of sustainable habits.
Okay, let's unpack this because I am so ready to demystify the sheer volume of conflicting advice out there. I want to start on the gym floor.
Oh, the gym floor. Yes.
Because deliberate exercise is where I see people agonizing the most over their spreadsheets. You walk into a gym today and it feels like everyone is running a complicated algorithm just to lift a dumbbell.
Seriously.
They're tracking rest periods to the exact millisecond. They're stacking cluster sets, pushing drop sets to total failure. It's exhausting just to watch.
It is, and it creates this massive barrier to entry and, frankly, a barrier to consistency, which is exactly why I brought a brand new 2026 systematic review and meta-analysis from the Journal of Functional Morphology and Kinesiology.
Oh, nice. What'd they look at?
Well, the researchers looked at 23 different studies involving recreationally trained adults. So these are people who already have a baseline of fitness. They know their way around a weight room.
Right, so not just complete beginners making newbie gains.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
they wanted to see what happens when you pit traditional baseline straight set training against the industry's most popular advanced techniques.
So they're taking the classic approach, like lifting a challenging weight, resting for a bit, and repeating and comparing it directly against that whole gauntlet of cluster sets, drop sets, giant supersets, the stuff that leaves you absolutely gasping for air.
Yep. The exact regimens that influencers claim are the secret to maximizing muscle hypertrophy.
Okay, so what did they actually find?
The findings provide a massive, scientifically backed sigh of relief.
Thank goodness.
Right. When comparing these grueling advanced systems to traditional straight sets, the advanced system showed a very small, albeit statistically significant edge for raw strength.
Okay, a tiny edge for strength. But what about getting bigger? Building the muscle?
That was the real surprise. The advantage for actual muscle growth, hypertrophy, was categorized as trivial. It was entirely statistically insignificant.
Wait, I really want to dig into the biology of that. Because the entire premise of a drop set where you lift a weight to failure, immediately grab a lighter weight, go to failure again, the whole point is to flood the muscle with metabolic stress.
Right, it's the pump.
Yeah, you get that massive cellular swelling, the pump, that burning sensation from the metabolites building up. We have been told for years that that specific stress is a primary driver for muscle growth. So why isn't it outperforming the basics?
What's fascinating here is how the body actually prioritizes adaptation. You are absolutely correct that advanced techniques create massive metabolic stress. But muscle growth is primarily driven by mechanical tension.
Mechanical tension.
Yeah, the actual physical force exerted on the muscle fibers, which forces the actin and myosin cross bridges inside the muscle to adapt and grow thicker. When you use complex techniques like drop sets or short rest cluster sets, you accumulate peripheral fatigue very quickly.
Oh, I see. So your nervous system is basically tapping out before the muscle has experienced enough sheer physical tension to actually trigger the adaptation.
Essentially, yes. The central nervous system gets completely overwhelmed by the fatigue and that metabolite buildup you mentioned, and that prevents you from recruiting the high-threshold motor units.
You feel exhausted.
Right, you feel totally drained, so you think you've had this superior workout. But from a purely mechanistic standpoint, you haven't delivered any more mechanical tension than if you had just rested 3 minutes and lifted a heavy weight again.
Wow. So obsessing over drop sets and cluster sets is kind of like installing a carbon fiber racing spoiler on a daily commuter car.
Yeah.
Sure, it's advanced, it looks aggressive, but just turning the key and driving the straight sets gets you to the exact same destination.
That's a perfect analogy, and it liberates you from the burden of perfectionism. The mechanism for building muscle is mechanical tension and progressive overload. You do not need to hog 3 different machines to run some crazy circuit.
People will hate you for that anyway.
Exactly. You don't need a complex algorithm. Just showing up, lifting a challenging weight, and resting adequately gets the job done.
That is incredibly refreshing. But I want to pivot a bit here, because while the gym crowd is overcomplicating mechanical tension, there's this massive cultural shift happening where people are trying to bypass that physical effort altogether.
Ah, yes. The GLP-1 medications.
Right. The absolute explosion of GLP-1 receptor agonists.
It is arguably the most significant medical intervention in obesity treatment in our lifetime.
For sure.
These medications fundamentally alter appetite signaling in the hypothalamus, and they slow gastric emptying, so they cause people to naturally consume drastically fewer calories without feeling starved.
So we have some very concerning new data from the Endocrine Society's Endo 2026 conference about this. Researchers have been tracking the behavioral shifts in adults using these meds, and they found a steep, measurable drop in physical activity.
It's alarming.
Yeah, the moment the weight starts coming off, their daily movement, their step counts, exercise frequency, it all just plummets.
It's a striking behavioral change. As the chemical intervention kind of takes over the weight loss process, the actual physical habit of moving the body is just being abandoned.
Okay, wait, here's where it gets really interesting. Let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
If the medication is mimicking the satiety hormone, keeping them in a steep caloric deficit, and the scale is dropping rapidly, why does it matter if their step count drops? Aren't they still reaching the goal? I mean, the visceral fat is melting off, the joints have less load on them.
And that assumption right there is exactly why we are facing a secondary health crisis with these drugs. Weight on a scale is completely indiscriminate.
Meaning it doesn't care what you're losing.
Exactly. When you induce a steep, chemically driven caloric deficit, the body enters a catabolic state. It desperately needs energy, and it isn't just going to nicely tap into your fat stores.
Oh no.
If you are not actively signaling to your body that your muscle tissue is necessary for survival by mechanically loading it, the body will literally strip amino acids from your skeletal muscle just to maintain vital organ function.
Wow, so it's sarcopenia. They're basically accelerating age-related muscle loss.
Dramatically. Muscle is not just structural, right? It's your primary metabolic engine. It is the largest glucose sink in the human body, soaking up blood sugar to prevent insulin resistance.
Right.
So when GLP-1 users stop moving and stop lifting, they might lose 40 pounds, sure, but 15 of those pounds could be lean metabolic tissue.
That's terrifying.
They become lighter, but their basal metabolic rate crashes. They feel lethargic all the time. And ironically, their insulin sensitivity can actually worsen because they've lost the very tissue responsible for clearing the glucose.
So the GLP-1 absolutely doesn't replace the need for the gym. If anything, the chemical reduction in calories makes the mechanical tension of the gym exponentially more critical. You have to give the central nervous system a reason to hold on to that muscle.
Bingo. Without resistance training and daily movement, you're risking sarcopenic obesity. That's a state where you might have a normal BMI, but a dangerously high body fat percentage relative to your muscle mass.
Because there's no muscle left.
Exactly. The medication is a phenomenal tool, but stripping away the foundational habit of physical activity while using it is just a physiological disaster.
Which brings us to the immediate next question. If movement is the non-negotiable mechanism to keep our biological engines running, especially in a caloric deficit, how much movement is actually required?
Ah, the magic number question.
Yeah, because I know people who will literally pace their living room at 11:30 p.m. just staring at their smartwatch, terrified they're going to lose their health, if they don't cross that magical 10,000-step threshold.
Oh, we have all been conditioned to worship the 10,000 step metric. But a massive dose response meta analysis published across 2025 and 2026 in the Lancet Public Health completely dismantles it.
Really, completely.
Completely. They pulled data from 57 different studies tracking cardiovascular health and all-cause mortality across massive diverse populations over long timelines.
I love dose response data.
Yeah.
It shows us exactly where the physiological returns start to diminish. So what does the biology actually say?
The data reveals that the steepest, most dramatic drop in mortality risk, meaning the massive improvement in your cardiovascular and metabolic health, occurs when individuals transition from a highly sedentary state of, say, 2,000 or 3,000 steps up to just 7,000 steps a day.
Just 7,000.
Just 7,000.
And what's actually happening in the vascular system at that specific threshold to cause such a sharp drop in mortality?
It comes down to endothelial function. The sheer mechanical stress of blood pumping through your arteries during those first few thousand steps, it triggers the endothelial cells lining your blood vessels to release nitric oxide.
And nitric oxide dilates the vessels, right?
Exactly. It keeps them elastic, prevents plaque buildup. The physiological heavy lifting for your arterial health is almost entirely accomplished by the time you hit those 7,000 steps.
Okay, so pushing yourself to hit exactly 10,000 steps when you're already at 8,000 is like trying to squeeze an extra gallon of gas into a tank that's already functionally full. You're getting most of the longevity benefit well before that 10K mark.
That's spot on. And the meta-analysis found that the mortality benefits actively plateau. For older adults, the vascular and longevity returns completely level off between 6,000 and 8,000 steps.
Wow, really?
Yeah, walking 12,000 steps did not offer any additional reduction in mortality risk compared to 8,000. And for younger adults, the plateau occurs just slightly later, around 8,000 to 10,000 steps.
The psychological relief of this data is just massive. I hear people say, like, I only hit 6,500 steps today, so the day was a total wash. They view 9,999 steps as a failure.
It's so counterproductive.
Right. But understanding the nitric oxide mechanism proves that 7,000 is a deeply protective, scientifically validated baseline. It fits into a busy modern life without requiring that sad midnight march around the kitchen island.
The all-or-nothing mindset really sabotages sustainable health. I mean,
Yeah.
do you know where the 10,000-step rule even came from?
Let me guess, not a lab.
Nope. It was born from a Japanese marketing campaign for a pedometer leading up to the 1964 Olympics. It was just a clean, round number that sounded good in advertisements. It was never derived from clinical vascular biology. 7,000 steps is the actual biological sweet spot.
So we've got the mechanical tension of straight sets, and we've got the vascular baseline of 7,000 steps. Naturally, once people accept the what and the how much, the optimization crowd immediately pivots to the when.
Of course they do.
We have listeners who will intentionally sleep deprive themselves to wake up at 5 a.m. for fasted cardio, absolutely convinced it's the only way to optimize their insulin sensitivity.
Yeah, chronobiology, which is the study of how our internal circadian rhythms affect our metabolism, is arguably the trendiest area of biohacking right now.
And we have some very specific 2026 RCT data on this. Researchers took populations with prediabetes, gave them the exact same aerobic training protocol, but split them into a morning exercise group and an afternoon exercise group.
And the afternoon group won out, right?
Yes. The results showed that the afternoon group experienced a significantly sharper improvement in peripheral insulin sensitivity and had lower fasting glucose the next day.
Well, from a purely mechanistic standpoint, this makes sense in a vacuum. In the early morning, your body experiences what's called the cortisol awakening response.
Right, to wake us up.
Exactly. Your adrenal glands release a surge of cortisol to pull you out of sleep, which naturally elevates your blood sugar and creates a state of temporary mild insulin resistance, so your brain has enough energy to start the day.
Okay, that makes sense.
So exercising during that cortisol peak can sometimes blunt the immediate glucose-lowering effects of the workout itself.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Should we all be frantically calling our bosses, rescheduling our mornings, and moving our jogs to 3:000 p.m. just to optimize our blood sugar?
This raises an important question, and honestly, it perfectly illustrates the danger of hyperfixating on a single physiological biomarker. Yes, the afternoon group had better fasting glucose, but that is a single finger prick measurement taken in the morning. It's just a snapshot.
Exactly. To really understand human health, we have to look at the entire 24-hour biological cycle.
Enter the counter evidence.
Precisely. A separate, massive 2026 time-of-day meta-analysis published in Chronobiology International took a much wider view. They basically discarded the single morning finger prick and instead analyzed studies using continuous glucose monitors, CGMs.
Oh, that changes everything.
It does. They tracked the area under the curve for blood sugar 24 hours a day through every meal, every stressful email, every sleep cycle.
So they're seeing the whole metabolic picture. What actually happens when you zoom out to 24 hours?
The afternoon advantage practically vanished. When you measure the body's total glucose disposal over a full day and night, there is no clear across-the-board winner between morning, afternoon, or evening exercise.
Wait, how is that possible if the morning cortisol spike is causing temporary insulin resistance? Does the body just, catch up later? Essentially, yes. Blood sugar regulation ultimately relies on GLUT4 transporters. These are proteins inside your muscle cells that travel to the cell surface to pull glucose out of the blood.
Okay.
Muscle contraction forces those transporters to the surface regardless of what time the clock says. If you train in the morning, your overall 24-hour glucose clearance improves. If you train at night, it improves. The physiological differences over a full circadian cycle are basically microscopic.
So forcing a natural night owl to wake up at 5:00 a.m. to jog against their biological chronotype is entirely pointless. They'll be miserable. They'll likely quit after 3 weeks, and a 0-minute jog at 5:00 a.m. yields 0 GLUT4 translocation.
Exactly. The overarching takeaway from the chronobiology data is profound. Behavioral compliance infinitely outweighs microscopic circadian optimization. The absolute best time to train is simply the time your schedule allows you to do it consistently.
That is so freeing.
You aren't missing out or sacrificing your metabolic health by lifting weights at 7:00 p.m. instead of 6:00.
I just love how all this data continuously points us back to common sense. We've simplified the mechanical output, the daily steps, the timing, but we absolutely have to address the biological engine's fuel.
Ah, diet. Yeah.
Because you can execute the perfect straight sets at 3:00 p.m., but if your cells are bathing in hyperprocessed junk, the whole system falls apart.
Nutrition is the final battleground of health optimization, and it is easily the most dogmatic.
Which is why this final source is so telling. It isn't just another mechanistic study of a single nutrient. It's a 2026 survey conducted by U.S. News & World Report, pulling data directly from clinical medical doctors, registered dietitians, and epidemiological researchers.
The people on the front lines.
Right. They asked these clinicians to identify the single most effective dietary pattern for long-term health and weight management. And in a field that argues over literally everything, a massive 69% overwhelmingly picked the Mediterranean diet over all the other trendy patterns.
It is staggering consensus, particularly because the Mediterranean diet isn't actually a diet in the modern biohacking sense of the word, you know?
Right. It's not a rigid set of rules.
Exactly. It isn't an elimination protocol. It doesn't force you into ketosis, and it doesn't require you to anxiously avoid, anti-nutrients in vegetables.
It feels ironic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We are surrounded by podcasts selling engineered ketone esters, people terrified of the oxalates in spinach, folks trying strict carnivore diets or 7-day water fasts, and the top clinical recommendation for 2026 is just eating real food. Plenty of produce and healthy fats.
The biology explains the consensus perfectly, though. Restrictive, fad diets often disrupt the gut microbiome by starving it of diverse fibers. But the Mediterranean approach, which is heavy on fresh produce, whole grains, lean proteins, and polyunsaturated fats like olive oil, it provides a synergistic food matrix.
Synergy is the key word there.
Absolutely. The polyphenols and omega-3s reduce systemic inflammation, while the diverse fibers feed gut bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids. Those fatty acids actively repair the gut lining and regulate the immune system. You simply cannot replicate that complex biological synergy with hyper-restrictive diet or a handful of isolated supplements.
It's like the whole orchestra playing together, rather than just trying to isolate the tuba.
Beautifully said. And it perfectly mirrors the workout data from earlier. Complex, hyper-restrictive systems, whether it's an agonizing drop-set matrix on the gym floor or an extreme elimination diet in the kitchen, they offer a temporary illusion of control. But over a timeline of decades, simple, biologically sound sustainability always wins. If we connect this to the bigger picture, consistency in the basics is the true advanced technique.
That really brings this entire deep dive full circle. If you take anything away from this mountain of 2026 data, let it be the profound biological relief of simplification. You don't need highly complex gym routines. Mechanical tension from simple straight sets drives growth.
Right.
If you're utilizing a GLP-1 medication, you have to protect your metabolic engine with resistance training. You don't need to force 10,000 steps if 7,000 fits your life beautifully. The time of day you train is secondary to simply doing it. And the best diet is the sustainable, centuries-old Mediterranean approach.
It's a powerful reminder that the human body is a highly adaptable biological system. It doesn't need to be relentlessly hacked. It just needs reliable, sustainable inputs.
So I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on as you go about your day. We have just seen that the clinical data overwhelmingly supports simplicity, which makes me wonder, does the very act of obsessively tracking, micromanaging, and stressing over finding the perfect modern health hack actually cause enough chronic psychological stress to counteract the physical benefits of the exercise itself?
That is a fascinating point. The chronic stress of pursuing perfect health might literally be the most toxic exposure of all.
Something to really think about the next time you look down at your smartwatch. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Do your physiology a massive favor today. Leave the tracker on the charger, don't worry about the perfect circadian timing, and just go enjoy a simple walk and a really good meal today. We'll catch you next time.